Did Jesus make mistakes? Did Jesus make mistakes? And I love how things come together. The songs, the scriptures, and Keyshawn opened with the scripture again from Hebrews. I want to read a passage. I wasn't planning on to read this passage, but I want to read this passage because it goes with this question I've been having. Did Jesus make mistakes? The Hebrew writers say in chapter 5, 7 through 10 said, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Now listen to this. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Beautiful Hebrews chapter 1 reading this morning. But he learned obedience through what he suffered, and then being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation. Doesn't answer the question, though, does it? Jesus made mistakes. It's hard to imagine. We know Jesus as the sinless one. It really is hard to imagine Jesus making a mistake. I say that because the lesson this morning is, just double check, I think. Yes, I knew you were going to be surprised at that. The Way We Were. She remembered, it's a Barbra Streisand song, The Way We Were. It's funny, when Claudia contacts me, we message during the week, and so she gets a chuckle out of these things. She says, I'm watching Barbra Streisand movies. Isn't that weird? And then she sends me another title, and I'm like, I'm standing in water. And I don't know if she got the connection, but she said something about the tides, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in the water. So it's just incredible how the Spirit works in us. But for humans, for the human condition, we can't help but look back and reflect. And always at the end of the year, we always want to look back at the previous year as we get ready for a new year, and then we look ahead, right? But Jesus said, those who look back aren't worthy. We think of Lot's wife who looked back. She was looking back, and she got frozen in her tracks. Jesus says you're not worthy if you look back. But it's the human condition. For us who make mistakes, it's one of the ways we learn is when we do something wrong, we get to reflect on it. I asked with the question about Jesus because when we consider Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, we can look to Jesus, and the Hebrew writers say, fix our eye on Jesus. Amazing that God, not only did God intend to come and enter the creation, but he entered as a baby and then he had to grow. He's a baby in a humble estate, born in a manger, and then he has to grow, and Luke tells us he grew in favor with God and men. But did he make mistakes? Because in leadership, right, when we're in a leadership position, or we're learning leadership, or we're in an organization, do leaders always make the right choices? No, and people don't let us forget, right? So if you do something wrong and you make a mistake, we always say in leadership, you could tell 100 things right about somebody and they remember the one thing you said bad about them. We just tend to be that way. Well, the verse that Alan read this morning is from Nehemiah, and Nehemiah verses 8 through 10. And Linda, this morning is very easy to remember. 3 verses, 3 R's. It's going to be remember, verse 8, restore, verse 9, and redeem, verse 10. And the words are in the verses, so it's easy to remember. Okay? Remember, restore, and redeem. And we as humans and the human family, we look back, we reflect back. And what does that do? It helps us to chart the course for the future, because we get to analyze things that maybe we did right, maybe we did wrong. Israel's history, as we can read about in the Old Testament, Israel's history and their cycle of, doing good, doing not so good, falling apart, then crying out to God, and God rescues them, and then they do good, and then they forget God, and they go through this cycle, and we get to read about it, but it's there for our learning. When Nehemiah has this prayer time with God, I want us to consider this, and I love the fact that we're going to do this prayer service, because I want you to see from Nehemiah's perspective what was going on. I'm not going to read a lot, but I am going to point out from chapter 8, they did read a lot, okay? They did read a lot, but I want you to see the context of this Nehemiah. So if you're in your Bible, look at Nehemiah. Right, Nehemiah, it's right after Ezra. They kind of work side by side, Nehemiah and Ezra, but it's right after Chronicles in your Old Testament. Nehemiah is not he's not listed with one of the minor prophets, but it says, the words of Nehemiah, son of Hekeliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the capital, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah and asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And this was the Babylonian exile. This was the last assault, if you will, when Judah finally fell and Jerusalem was taken over by King Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 3, and they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. Well, they pretty much ransacked the city. They starved them out, and then when they were just devastated, they came in, and when Babylon came through Jerusalem, they just wiped it out. So it didn't look like much of anything when they left there. And so a lot of the people, the Jews that were left behind, were in the outskirts and recovering as best they could. But remember, it was 70 years. They had 70 years of exile. So verse 4, now this is interesting because it gives us a little insight into Nehemiah. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. I wept and mourned for days. So he learns of the condition of his brothers, and he's devastated by it. I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Verse 5, and I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love and keep his commandments. Verse 6, listen to this. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you have commanded your servant Moses. So, acknowledging we're in this situation. Now, Nehemiah right now, he's the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. And if you don't know what the cupbearer's responsibility is, well, when the king wants to make merry, the cupbearer is going to bring him his wine, and he gets to drink it first. So if any of the king's enemies wanted to poison him, he's going to take the first shot. But it's much bigger than that. To be a cupbearer is to be a trusted advisor in the king's council. And so here is where the scripture that was read, verse 8 through 10. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are faithful, or if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and your strong hand. Now, he says in verse 11, O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was cupbearer to the king. So here, this is very similar, if you recall, Daniel. Daniel was one of the exiles that was brought into Babylon, and he and his 3 companions, they were brought in and trained in the king's service. But Daniel's the one that interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and because of it, he's elevated. He's like the chief of the council. And he now has audience with the king. Well, Nehemiah seems to be in this exalted position with the king. So in chapter 2, he says, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. So Nehemiah is normally of good cheer. Things are okay. He drinks the wine. Whoo-hoo, I'm still here. Life is good. Right? But he's somehow, the king notices that he's out of sorts, and he asks him. And so now Nehemiah is going to be honest. He's going to open up to the king. The king in verse 2 said, why is your face sad? Are you sick? Nothing but sadness of heart. Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruin and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king said to me, now check this out. I think this is amazing. What are you requesting? So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said to the king, if it please the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. That's pretty bold, right? And their relationship has to be pretty significant, because look at the response. In verse 6, the king said to him, and the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. So Nehemiah says, I need some time. But look at this in verse 7. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And watch this. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple and for the wall of the city, for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of God was upon him. So basically the king, he asked the king, hey, I need some time. I need to go assess what's going on. So I'm going to have a house. I need to build a house there. I need a place to stay. And it's going to take me some time. And he asked for timber. And Jerusalem's not a big place, but to put a wall around it or to rebuild the wall, it's pretty significant. And so that's no small amount. So not only does the king grant him the letters and access to the timbers, but he sends him an entourage with his own guard. And it turns out he's going to be there for about 12 years. So it's pretty interesting. What an undertaking. But he's going to go there, and then he's going to gather the people up, and they're going to start rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. And they're going to start identifying, there's about 50,000 in the area. And as they start building, they get some of the rulers of the area. They were chiding him, but they let him pass. They had letters from the king, but they start being ridiculed and antagonized. What are these Jews doing? What are they up to? And so this is where you see it becomes one of these things where they have to build the wall. It says they got a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. And so they have people there guarding them. Now they only get the wall about 52 days. They get the wall about half built, half to what it was. But they don't have the doors on yet. they don't have the doors for all the different areas. This last week, we were looking at kind of the temple in the wilderness, and they had these panels that they put up around, and each tribe was in their own areas. Well, the temple was kind of the same, similar in Jerusalem, where they had these temple gates all the way around the wall for where the different tribes were. Anyway, so there's the scene. They get the wall about half built, and they still need to put the doors on, but they've got people there, and they're getting some resistance. But isn't it incredible that God allows them to go back? So, in this remembrance, they remember what Jerusalem was before it fell. And they have this idea, and when they rebuilt it, there was a great lament in Jerusalem because it wasn't the glory that they were used to. It wasn't the temple, when they rebuilt it, it wasn't what it used to be. And they were longing for, their former glory. But it's pretty incredible that they were able to be restored. And it was part of Deuteronomy, it was part of in the law of Moses that, look, you become too unfaithful for me, I'm going to scatter you all over the place. But when you cry out to me and you return to me, then I'll restore you. And so by chapter 8, this is where Ezra enters in here. In Nehemiah chapter 8, all the people gathered as one man into the square before the water gate, and they told Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses that the Lord had commanded Israel. So Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly, both men and women, and all who could understand what they heard on the first day of the 7th month. Now, I'm sure you'll be thankful for this. But verse 3 says, and he read from it facing the square before the water gate from early morning until midday. I knew you'd get a kick out of that. In the presence of the men and women and those who could understand. And the ears of all the people were attentive to the book of the law. Why? Do you think God finally got their attention? The prophets had said, remember, before Jerusalem fell, Jeremiah was saying, go quietly, and they were ridiculing him and trying to put him to death because they were gathering false prophets to them to say, oh no, Jerusalem's not going to be taken over. And it was horrible. Had they gone, like Jeremiah said, it might not have been so bad, but it was pretty terrible. But one of the things they said, because they had this experience, because they were living in exile for 70 years, because they saw the ruin, they saw the majesty, and then they saw the ruin. They remembered the glory, and they knew why it happened. Why did it fall? Because they sinned. They turned away from God. And so now they're crying out, but now they have some history there. And by the way, if you read those preceding chapters, these are all the sons. This is a new generation that kind of rose up here that are helping rebuild the wall now. And so they're kind of like, they got to see what it was when they were young, and then they grew up pretty miserable time in perspective, but now they're going to try and get some glory back. So verse 4, Ezra the scribe stood on a wooden platform that they had made for that purpose, and beside him stood, can't pronounce it. I won't read all those names. But they're on his left and his right. And then Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. And as he opened, all the people stood. And Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all the people answered, Amen, Amen, lifting up their hands, and they bowed their heads and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. What they were hearing, it's almost like, you guys remember Josiah. when Josiah was king and they were restoring the temple in his day, and then they found the law, they found the scrolls, and they read it to Josiah, and he tore his clothes, and he was basically ashamed. They were not keeping any of the things that the Lord had commanded them. So now they're hearing, some of these may be hearing this for the first time, and verse 8, they read from the book of the law of God clearly, and they gave sense so that people understood the reading. And by the way, this is what the job of the priests are to do, is to take God's word and say it and then make it understandable so that they could really understand it. Because it said all the people would gather there and the ones that could understand. So I'm sure, what was that? Oh yeah, and they would explain it to them. So Nehemiah, apparently they make him governor. This is verse 9. He was governor, and Ezra was the priest and the scribe. And the Levites who taught the people said to all the people, "This day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep." For all the people wept as they heard the words of the law. Can you imagine that? Do we have a heart for God? Then he said to them, "Go your way, eat the fat and drink sweet wine, and send portions to anyone who has nothing ready. For this day is holy to our Lord. And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." What they do is they confess their sins. They realize their sin. And to get back to the glory is to get back to God. God's the only one that can redeem them. God's the only one that can restore their glory. And as they're reading through, they came to this festival of the booths. And they realized that they had not kept that festival. Just like we can read about how long it went before. They were supposed to keep the Passover every year. And the Jews just, over time, just forgot all about it and stopped practicing. Things are going good. We're doing things our way. God must be with us. Well, when they hear about the booths and what the booths were, it was a festival that Israel was supposed to keep to remind them that they were sojourners. So when they had the festival of the booths were like tents. They were to leave their homes and stay in their tents. And like it says here, I mean, they put the booths on their roofs, wherever they could, in their courtyards, wherever they could, but they made booths, these little shelters, out of olive branches and things, and myrtle. And it said that they practiced the festival of the booths, and all the people rejoiced because, and we had talked about this this last week about different hotel chains. Remember I said that there's a hotel chain where all the leaders come, or the owners, and they make all the executives be bellhops and servants, to remind them that they started out as servants, that nobody is really above anybody else. So when they're all in booths, they're kind of all equal, and they're rejoicing together, and they're helping one another, and they have this camaraderie, and it became joyful to them. So they're hearing the law again, and they're saying, we want to have this fellowship with God. We want God on our side. Now, my understanding, tradition is when Jerusalem comes back, now when Judah comes back, Israel comes back after this exile, they don't fall into idolatry again like they had before. This, they said, pretty much cured them of it. All right? It was so devastating. But the idea here is they confess their sins, and they're asking for renewal. And I thought it would be, this is what we tend to do at the end of the year, is we look back. And it's ironic to me that this is the year 2020. I don't know, people were correcting me about this. The 2020 means good vision, right? You have good vision. And that's why I put it 2020. Jesus has perfect vision. 2020, right? But 2020 is anything but clear vision, good vision. What a year of craziness. And you know that there has been, normally, as we've been reading through Acts in our morning study, normally it's the preaching of the word and people accepting the word that causes division in your family and persecution to come. And that's happened on so many different levels now. Families are at each other's throats. There's so much anxiety over what's going on. You've got families, and we always used to say around here, winter is cabin fever time, right? So if you have to be in your house together, I told you the tradition in Asia is the spring festival is, they don't blame each other. They say there's evil spirits in the house and they got to chase them all out at spring festival because you're at each other's throats. I don't know how much we get along with somebody. There's a breaking point, right? Sometimes too much is too much. And we just need to get outside. They went out in booths and they found that they were common. They had a common fellowship. I want to suggest for us as we look forward to this new year, a year that I'm very excited about the school coming here, about the Word of God being preached, that the church, and we can pray about this and need to pray about this a lot, that the church take up a mantle in our society now that's been lacking for a long time. We had said during 9/11, after 9/11 happened, that there were a lot of people, when change comes, that they're more attentive. What is God doing when people are in trouble or their lives are turned upside down? There's an opportunity there. The church is the place where God's will is made understandable, but only if we come together as a church and become attractive to people who are seeking a better way. Because I don't think the chaos is going to end anytime soon. And Gordon likes to say people are more receptive in times of transition. There are great opportunities. I had Janice over for our Christmas dinner. Our whole family got, like probably yours, we had a story like your Thanksgiving. It's just like all our plans got scrapped at the last minute. There was a COVID scare and really kids did really stupid things. But anyway, it just threw a monkey wrench into our old plans. So I was planning on doing dinners this weekend, and it didn't work out because I had to have my turkey. Thankfully, I had a backup turkey, and we had turkey dinner at my house. But I had Janice over. Do you know, other than the meals we had over the summer, Janice has not been out of the house and had any outside contact other than here. And I know she's not the only one. I know there are a lot of people like that. I know Rita's been isolated. A lot of people have been, but she really wanted to come today, but it's too much. She starts a new treatment on Tuesday, and I'm hoping this really helps out. But she had such a great time. It reminded me of who we are as a body and the outreach. There are people starving right now, starving for attention. They're hurting. They need affection. We've had our family's been turned upside down because of death in the family. We're having a reunion this afternoon, but it's been so bizarre, and I know your family's the same. Things are just so out of whack. Now more than ever, the church needs to be a shining beacon of hope. And I hope as we come together and as we pray that the message of hope ends with the third R. We need to remember, we need to restore, but the ultimate picture in our minds needs to be redemption. Redemption. It's the eternal glory. That's the number one thing. And if we can have fellowship in the church and rejoice for that eternal glory where we don't have positions. In the church, we're all sinners in the eyes of God. If we can come together out of diverse circumstances, we can offer a whole lot of hope to a world. I have a lot of friends, and I know you do too, that have had their lives turned upside down, and I think we have an opportunity to kind of gather some people in who got disillusioned about some of the things that were going on in their various religious walk or their families. So what I'm saying is pray. I mean, Nehemiah prayed day and night. Pray for this restoration, because everybody is looking for a renewal as we look to a new year. And so there's so much opportunity going ahead now. For us, I'd like to challenge us to go into the new year to be prayerful, to have prayer be on our mind and pray to God, what can we do? We've done spiritual gifts analysis and all kinds of stuff of what is it that I can do? What can I do? I cook turkey, all right? Let me just say it. I cook turkey. That's one of my ministries, all right? I love it. So there's never going to be a shortage of turkey at Tom's house, all right? Because, fellowship, hospitality, benevolence, mercy. What can we do to build each other up and to reach out? And then how can these things become more outreach? And let's use each other. Let's make a commitment this year going forward to be in the Word, to study the Word of God, to get that Word deep in us so that we're not pulled back into the world, so that we can stay the course and keep our eyes securely fixed on Jesus, because the goal is to get to heaven. Let's pray. Dear Father, you are an awesome God, as Nehemiah prayed. Father, we live in such a tumultuous time. It seems to be high drama this time of year with our families. In my family, it's no different, but it always seems to come together. We always do set aside our differences and are able to show love. I pray, Father, for a dark world be introduced to the gospel light in a new way. I pray, Father, that you use us up for good in this life, that you help us be attentive, that we know your word so well that we can offer your gospel in a tender way, that we don't get upset and angry the way the world does, but we find a way to introduce people to a loving Savior who has redemption in mind from the beginning of time, before he laid the foundations of the earth. I thank you for our fellowship here, and I pray for those who couldn't be here today, who wanted to be. I thank you so much for the technology that allows us to reach out in ways we never imagined, even a few short years ago. I pray, Father, that all these instruments be used to your glory. I pray that we find a way to build each other up, and we resist the attitudes of the world, Father, and really love one another here, and so that we attract others to come to a knowledge of your truth. I pray, Father, for this fellowship around the world. I pray for peace in your kingdom, Father. There's so much persecution right now. I just pray, Father, that you build us up and you make us strong. I pray, Father, that you bless us beyond what we deserve, because we don't deserve the love that you show us. But I thank you so much for your church. I thank you so much for your son and his example and his willingness to buy this church with his own blood. So, Father, thank you again for this time we have together. And I pray, Father, for those who need an extra measure of your Spirit, you allow their hearts to be softened and open to this message. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we have a redemption song, Restore. I Am Resolved. We'll sing that song.